Hey, welcome to the Like Father, Like Daughter podcast. I'm Paul.
And I'm Ariana.
Today we're going to talk about Star Trek Discovery. Okay, so the title of this episode is Digging Deep for Discovery. I think we're going to have to dig a little deep. But before we start, I have some corrections from our last podcast regarding Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So the first thing I said was that the captain of the first Enterprise, or the first captain of the Enterprise, was Richard April. That is incorrect. It is Robert April. So I'm making that correction. And then I also said that Robert April was the first captain of the Enterprise, which technically he is. So he's technically the first captain of NCC 1701 ship, okay? But Jonathan Archer is the first captain of the ship, first starship named Enterprise, which is NX-01. So that was in Star Trek Enterprise, right? So that was actually a test, or this kind of NX, NX means it's like an experimental ship. So that's what that was. So I was kind of around there. I also said that Next Generation is set in the 23rd century, is actually set in the 24th century.
I actually think I knew that one.
Oh, and you didn't correct me?
Well, I didn't realize.
You didn't realize what? That you should correct me? Okay. Enterprise is actually set, Star Trek Enterprise with Jonathan Archer is set in the mid-22nd century. Or actually Enterprise, Enterprise, the original series with Kirk, is set in the mid-22nd century.
Oh.
Spock, when he had to fight for, the Ponfar thing, I said that he had to fight Soran. He had to fight Stan.
Oh.
Soran was actually in Star Trek Generations, where Picard and Kirk were in the same movie. Soran was the bad guy in that one, so I had that wrong. Okay, so T'Pring, Spock's future wife, right, future intended wife in this, so they weren't married. That was his fiance, and that is also the same in Star Trek Strange New Worlds. They're not married yet.
They're not?
They're just engaged.
Oh.
Yep. And then remember we talked about, also, by the way, there's spoilers here. So.
Oh, right.
Yeah, spoilers, sorry. So far I haven't spoiled anything unless you have never watched Star Trek, and then actually why you're listening to this podcast. But anyway.
Yeah, that is true.
But anyway, you remember how I said Hemmer died?
Yeah.
Right? And then we had talked about, are they going to bring Scotty back to Strange New Worlds?
Yeah.
Well, Scotty did have a minor cameo in the season finale of Strange New Worlds. It was just his voice.
I remember, yeah.
Yes, okay. And then also Kirk's brother is George Samuel Kirk Jr. and was played by William Shatner in the original series in Operation Annihilate. Because we couldn't remember that, so I'm kind of making a correction here. And that's the episode, remember, where Operation Annihilate, that's the episode where those flying creatures, those flying like egg-like creatures were sucking on their...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's where Kirk's... So actually Kirk played his brother, and like again, though it was kind of like, oh my gosh, that's my brother, he's dead. And then, then go on with the mission.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's just his brother. I mean, who cares, right? Okay, so now that we've got all the corrections done with our first episode, we're going to go into Star Trek Discovery. So just a brief overview of what Discovery was. Again, if you have not watched Discovery, you may want to stop this episode now, because we will spoil a bunch of stuff.
We will spoil pretty much from beginning to end of Discovery, unless you are someone who doesn't watch Star Trek and you're just watching this for the fun of it, or listening to it, then I guess that's fine, but fair warning.
Right. So, Discovery begins 10 years before Kirk takes the Enterprise.
Yeah.
Okay. And Michael Berman is kind of the main character. She's not quite captain of Discovery.
Well, at the beginning, she was.
She was actually kind of just like she was she was kind of like an.
Well, she was a. She was a. Didn't she? She wasn't like, a prisoner. She was like a.
No, but she was like Giorgio's first mate or first officer. I can't remember.
Well, at the very, very, very beginning.
Yeah, she was not.
She wasn't even a part of Starfleet.
She's just a crew member.
Well, she wasn't even a part of Starfleet.
She helps. You're right. She wasn't. She was a prisoner, wasn't she?
She was like, she did something.
No, remember she was on a different ship. It wasn't Discovery at the time. It was on Giorgio's ship.
Yeah.
And she had that whole problem with the Klingons and ended up starting that Klingon Federation war, right?
Yep.
And then, so that was kind of the first season scope, where Berman has to kind of make up for things, and she's kind of not trusted, and Klingons are. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then the next season was about the Red Angel, where they saw this Red Angel signal, and then that ends up actually turning out to be something from the future, a signal from the future, which then sends them into the 32nd century. And then, also that Red Angel thing was about control, which is I think a pre-Borg thing. Section 31 started at that point, and then they forgot about Berman being Spock's sister. So we'll get into a little bit of all that as we talk about we'll talk about some of that. Okay, so let's just get into a little bit of what we think is. Let's just go into the first season of Discovery, right? Mm-hmm. So the first season of Discovery, the Klingons.
Yeah.
Go for it. Tell me what you think about the Klingons in the first season of Discovery.
They didn't remind me of Klingons.
And why?
Well, for one, they look different.
Yeah.
They look kind of Klingon-y, but I'm trying to remember. The first season was a really long time ago. But weren't some of them also gray?
Yeah, there's different colored Klingons. And I'm not going to even make any corrections on this one, but I can't remember the name of the Klingon that was albino, who was supposed to be the big leader thing.
It didn't feel like the classic Klingon, like the Klingons that we know. It kind of, I know that they looked different back then, I guess, but even in the original series, the Klingons then looked way different than the Klingons in this series.
Yeah, and then, they tried to explain that in the Next Generation or in Deep Space Nine or in one of the shows. But here's my problem with the Klingons in Discovery.
Yeah.
Every time they talk, it felt like they had a mouthful of cereal. I'm not even kidding. It was almost like you could tell that the prosthetics were getting in the way, right? Mm. And that really took me a little bit out of the show. Out of the element of the show, because I'm just because it was always it was almost. It was. They were speaking Klingon.
Yeah.
But it was almost like they were spitting every time they did it, and I was just like, "What is going on? Why?" And then I just didn't like the fact that they were, they could have been, like you said, they could have been more like Next Generation Klingons. Yeah. They could have been more like...
Even the original series Klingons, I know that you see them a few times.
Right. Well, they were just like humans with beards and hair and...
but if they just did that with some...
Yeah, with some forebrow...
prosthetics.
Yeah.
But they went all out for
they went too far. They went like the other side of Klingon, right?
I think they should just kept with, classic Klingon. Also, they were I don't know, when I think of Klingon, the first person I think of is Worf.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Right.
And even though Worf was raised by not Klingons, humans, he still gives off very much Klingon. And also the people that surround Worf when he's involved in other Klingon things, they're very, unique in all their different ways. And these Klingons kind of seemed all the same. To me.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of just they didn't have a lot of personality to them.
Here's the other thing I didn't like about the Klingons, because what's his face? Who's the one that was turned into? He was a human. He was a Klingon that was turned into a human. I should really have that page up. It was his name started with a V. But anyway, I didn't like the whole fact that they're okay. Here's my problem.
Mm-hmm.
So even in the Next Generation and Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and Voyager, turning someone from a Klingon to a human, right? Even all that DNA and genetic thing that they had to do to do that, was like way advanced technology. That even in
you're right.
Right, it just took me out of the timeline, because it's like, okay, come on. I mean, if this was possible, right? Even though he suffered, greatly to do it, if that was possible, then how come, all these other things that we saw in the other shows, right?
Yeah.
That none of that was ever done, right? I mean, even in Spock had to wear a hat all the time.
Yeah, he wasn't able to just
be a human.
Yeah.
It's not like they could change his ears.
That was something that started in, what was it, Next Generation? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, there was a little bit of that, but that's...
There wasn't, it was like, some of that, but it wasn't, you
right.
know, it wasn't extremely prevalent. It only became extremely prevalent until the later series of Star Trek.
Right.
Because the technology wasn't possible.
So, yeah, that kind of took me out of it. And then...
I just think, I think that the entire thing with Discovery with Klingons was kind of a flunk. I think that it was okay, but it wasn't like, it just, when I kind of like disassociated their representation of Klingon with actual Klingons, because it just didn't seem the same.
Yeah.
And so I kind of just, in my head, was like, well, it's a species, Yes, it's Klingons, but it just doesn't remind me of Klingons. Right.
Exactly. So, the other problem I have with season 1 of Discovery is the spore drive. This to me is the only reason they sent them back to the 32nd century.
Yeah.
Is because the spore drive was so advanced technology, right? They're able to go from one part of the universe to a completely different part of the universe, right? And if that technology had existed, I mean, so obviously the Federation built that ship.
Yeah.
Right? And I know they were testing it, right? But, I mean, it was so advanced.
It was so advanced that they couldn't even be in the original, they couldn't be in the original timeline anymore when...
Right.
And they had to send them back because, this doesn't fit continuity.
Yeah, right. And then, you're totally... And I think that was part of the problem with season 1.
Yeah.
Now, season 1...
Season 1 was... I think my favorite I discovered was season 2. But season 1 was like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
It was like
yeah,
mid.
We'll see where it goes, right?
Yeah.
So then season 2.
Season 2 when... Okay, it's the last... Because I have a big thing to say about... I think it was the last season with the ship's... the computer.
Oh, yes. We'll get into that too. Okay. The computer has... Okay, so... All right, so season 2 is the Red Angel, right? So there's this whole mystery about the Red Angel because they see the Red Angel and they're trying to figure out what it is.
Is this the one where her mom comes back?
Yeah, her mom comes back.
Okay.
And I'm not going to go into the entire plot because it's...
There was a lot of seasons.
Yeah, a lot of stuff in there. But let's just say, let's just go with season 2, the Red Angel, then the only thing that actually makes this season palatable is the fact that the Enterprise shows up.
Yeah.
With Pike, and then now you're like, oh wow, now I'm super interested, right? And then you find out that Spock and Berman are sister and brother, right?
Yeah.
And so then you're like, whoa, that's interesting. We didn't know about that. And then this whole season was set up to set.
Which is another reason they have to bring them into the a different century is because that's something that's not explained in the old series, obviously.
Right.
So.
And I know it sounds like we're hating on Discovery right now, and there's reasons, but we do like it.
It's like we like it, but there's a lot of things in the show that could have been done a lot better.
Yep.
I think out of all the other Star Trek shows, it's kind of bottom of the barrel.
Yep.
Which is why I'm like meh on it. It's an okay show.
It is an okay show, but anyway, so season 2, we get Spock. We find out they're sisters. The control thing was kind of cool. Control was kind of like a. This is actually where Section 31 starts up, and then you have control, which is sort of like a. It feels to me like this might be a pre-Borg kind of thing. Like maybe this is how the Borg evolved, right?
Yeah.
But what I think is cool, how this is what I actually like this part of Discovery, is what I think is cool, is that this Discovery ends up going back into the 30s, it goes forward into the 32nd century, but then to tie it all up with Control and with Spock's sister and the spore drive and everything, because if anyone so Spock had made the decision and talked to Starfleet about it, that they sealed all the records, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that if no one could ever talk about it under perjury of being, not perjury, but, it was something that if you talked about it, you could be removed from Starfleet.
Yeah.
And so that is why Spock never talked about his sister, right?
Yeah, because she was...
Right, but the other thing, too, is if anyone knew about Control, right, other than the people that did know, Control could start all over again, right? And so I thought that was kind of cool how they kind of tied all that in. And so they sent them to the 32nd century, right?
Yeah, is that also the season where we find out about Saru's culture?
Saru's culture, yes.
I thought that was really cool. Like, okay. Saru is one of my favorite characters, and he's like, I like anything when they get in depth about different species that we don't know already about,
right,
or not much of. And I really liked that whole, like, explanation of all of it and how it worked and stuff.
Right, yeah. That was cool. Mm-hmm. And so then there's season 3 of Discovery where they're in the 32nd century, and then they got to figure out why no one can go into warp again, and the whole, I can't remember what it's called. It's like it's not the Big Bang, because that's what starts the universe. But,
are you talking about their, like...
I can't remember what they call it.
The stuff that starts the ship?
No, remember, nobody can go into warp anymore because...
Yeah.
Because the...
because of the thingamabobber.
Yeah, we'll call it the thingamabobber. There is a name for it, but we don't know what it is. I can't remember. Anyway, let's get into the details of what's wrong and what's right about Discovery. So let's go with...
Did we talk about the 3rd season?
They just did. It's kind of a throwaway season.
Yeah, it was an interesting season. Something that bugged me so bad about that was the fact that the computer started to get consciousness.
Yes, right? The computer gets consciousness and now has its own brain.
And you would think, because they're like trying to decide, well, what do we do? And I'm like, you get rid of it, right? Like, you do not want a computer with consciousness on your ship. It has a mind of its own. That's not something you want. That's terrible for Starfleet. That's terrible for everybody on that ship. It is so dumb, and they've been through the same thing.
Right, and what bothers me is that the computer has more emotional depth than the Trill's ghost partner.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a computer.
Yeah, no kidding. And I'm like, okay, so there's been episodes where the computer has gotten consciousness before in other series, right? Mm-hmm. And then they get rid of it.
Well, they immediately get rid of it because...
Any malfunction that's, like, with the shuttle or, like, with the holodecks, it's, like, immediately...
Like Moriarty getting consciousness in this Next Generation.
Exactly.
And all the detective stuff. Yeah, they're like, whoa, this is a bad thing.
And then they get rid of it. But for Discovery, they're like, okay, well, we can trust it, we just have to have it... It's like a friend. And I'm like... Yeah, and I get, like, it's trying to send a message, but you can send that message.
There's a bazillion different ways.
Without literally
like, how
putting
about
the
giving
entire
some
ship in danger.
Yeah, really. How about giving some of the other characters to development? But anyway, we'll talk about that.
And then later, it does become a problem, and she's like, "Oh, doesn't she like almost explode the ship or something?"
I think so, yeah.
And then
But then they talk her down. They talk the ship down, and then they're like, "It's okay. We
it's
understand.
okay.
You're scared. You're a freaking ship. You're a computer."
Literally, and it's like that's like one thing that Star Trek is known for. Like, there's always malfunctions. Star Trek is known for malfunctions.
Well, every shuttlecraft show, the shuttlecraft. I don't know. I would never want to be on a shuttlecraft
because every single time it's like
they're gonna crash land on a planet or be stuck in some nebula.
And then all of a sudden there's like this species that's like gonna kill them.
Yes, exactly.
And so it's like there's always malfunctions, but they're always supposed to be bad, and that they always fix them. This one is not fixed, and this bothers me because I'm like, you shouldn't have a conscious ship. That's not a good thing, you know.
No.
No. I personally hope for the oncoming seasons that they realize this becomes a problem. You should, if you've made the ship a character, you can kill it. You know?
Yes, but that's not humane. Oh, wait a minute. The ship's not a human.
It's a ship.
Anyway.
So that's a big thing. That's that kind of really brought me out of it because that's not something Star Trek does ever.
Right.
But anyway.
Okay, so let's go into the first thing about Discovery. Let's go into the first thing of set design. Okay. So what about the set of Discovery and the design of Discovery and all these things do you like and what do you not like?
I like the diversity in characters, although they don't go deep into them. There is a lot of diversity of different characters, like how they look and stuff. I know that's not set design, but that is
design,
it's design of some kind. When it comes to the set itself, it's very boring, in my opinion. Other than like a few times where like Saru's quarters. I like Saru's quarters.
Yes, and I think we'll talk about the development of Saru, but his quarters and even his homeworld has been well designed.
Yes, it has. But when it comes to the general, there's a few things I like. I don't like the ship in this one. I just think they could have done better.
It feels very static. There's a lot of blinkies. And it almost feels too much J.J. Abrams in a sense. It's too much.
I think they should have gone with something older looking, considering
its era.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And I think that they could have done something a little more colorful, considering the fact that 10 years later they have a really colorful ship.
Right.
And so they could have done some kind of color palette, but their color palette's just kind of gray, and they didn't even go. I didn't like that the technology was also looking very modern when, in Enterprise, they have tons of buttons and things. So it's like this doesn't really make sense. I really liked the time where I think Book and Michael were having like a hard time with something between them, and then they go to that casino or whatever it was.
Oh, yeah, and that was that in the future?
I don't remember. It was in the newest season, but they went to like to play a game of
Dabo?
Yeah, I think so, with the Ferengi.
Well, I think it was Quark's. I think it was supposed to be Quark's bar in the future. I mean, he would have been dead, but I mean, you know.
But like, yeah, I get what you're saying, and it was like that whole. It was that whole place. I thought that was very well portrayed when it came to set design and cinematography. They used a lot of atmosphere, I could tell. And so I liked that, and I liked Saru's quarters. Saru's quarters was very nice. But when it comes to like the rest of the general places, unless it was like a planet, I think that they could have done better. Like, even with the headquarters area, it was just kind of metally. There wasn't really anything that stood out to me. When it came to the to the uniforms, they were okay. They were different, but they were, like, it all doesn't really make sense within the timeline to me.
Yeah, right. How about, yeah, I think you've pretty much covered what I would think in design as well. What about, let's just talk about cinematography now. How about cinematography for Discovery?
Cinematography for that one is either is really good or it's like too good, because sometimes
What do you mean by too good?
Sometimes like the characters' faces, either they just have done too much makeup, or it's just too sharp to the point where it just, you can see every little thing.
Yeah, I noticed that like on the Trill partner that turns into like a symbiote, the symbiote partner that gets a human body or a synthesized body. You remember that?
Yeah.
I don't even know how that worked either, because it's none of that storyline makes sense either.
No.
But we'll get into Gray. So Gray was the symbiont ghost or whatever, the memory, and played by Ian Alexander.
I think they just did too much heavily on the makeup.
Makeup, yeah.
And with the, I think that even with Michael and some of the others, it was just really close on their face, and you could notice a lot of the things, which means they had really good cameras, but also, like, I think that what they should have done is put some kind of filter that goes over the camera that makes things look like the light smoothed out, so they're not as shiny.
Yeah.
Because, when you're acting, you sweat, it depends on the scene, and the lights are on you, and, it's something that they should have put, like, it's like this greenish kind of film thing.
Right.
And I think that would have made a really cool effect. Otherwise, the cinematography is really good.
Right.
I think that I think their lighting techniques is really cool too. I like their lighting. I just think that, they could have done something where their actors didn't look extremely, like, sharp and, like, detailed and shiny, but that might either be a makeup problem or light problem or something. But other than that, I thought the cinematography was pretty good.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, let's talk about the main problem of Discovery, which is character development.
Oh yeah, character development.
Okay, so I just did a Google search just for Star Trek Discovery, right? And when you bring up that list of crew, right, of people now, all these people are great actors. There's no doubt about that, right?
It's just a matter of
but the writing is just okay. So like, I think the people that were focused on, so I think Michael Berman, right? Tilly was focused on until they retired her, right?
And then Saru,
and then
the engineer.
Yeah, Anthony Rapp plays Stamets, right?
Yeah.
And then the doctor.
He was only brought into it kind of like his character was only really developed.
His character's only there because of the spore drive.
Yeah. So I think it was only developed really at the last season.
Yeah.
And then of course there's Book.
Book, yeah, Book. I liked Book because
I liked Book too.
The problem is his accent is so heavy. Sometimes I couldn't understand what he was saying.
That's true.
Yeah.
It does sound really cool though.
Yeah.
So
now, if you look at I'm looking at the Google, so.
So those are the main characters.
The main characters.
Oh, and also, well, actually, no, we didn't get much character development with her. Never mind.
Right. So like, Oyen Alajo, I don't even know the name of her character, to be honest with you, and Google doesn't list it.
Yeah. They never said it in the show.
They have said it, but...
Oh, they have?
Ronnie Rowe, who plays, I think he's a comm officer, no character development, other than I had a bad childhood.
Yeah.
Sarah Midich, I don't even know her character's name. It's not listed. And there's several others that are kind of just side characters. that aren't listed here. Actually, most others are. The problem, so here's what I'm noticing. The ones that haven't, they're on the bridge. So in the original series, in Enterprise, in Next Generation, in Discover, in Voyager, in Deep Space Nine, if you were on the bridge, you were important.
You were a main character, or
You
at
were a
least
main
a side
character.
character that was known,
Right.
like Solo.
Yeah. Right.
Or like what's his name?
Chekhov.
Even Scotty, he wasn't on the bridge, and
Right.
know?
Well, he was. Yeah. Right. But I mean.
I mean, like there's tons of characters that if you're not on, even if you're not on the bridge, you're known about.
Right.
Like.
So I feel like the main problem with Discovery is that it does a lot of tell and not show, which we talked about in our first episode.
It's just the characters a lot of the time are like, unless you're a main character, like the side characters, if they're like, well, we haven't development on them yet, they're like, yeah, life sucks, or I had a bad childhood, or oh yeah, no, my dad died or something.
Right.
This one time.
And then Berman's like, thank you for sharing that with me. And then they go on with their mission, and then you're supposed to take that as backstory.
Yeah, and I'm like,
right.
Usually when it comes to backstory, there's like a flashback or, like they go through some breakdown and
you
then
know what
there's
I think
a flashback.
The problem Discovery writers have is they're afraid of flashbacks.
That's true. Yeah.
So, like, I was just watching Willow, right? And I know you've never watched the original Willow movie, which was done in like the 80s. There's a TV series now, The Willow.
Okay.
And so, but they do a lot of flashbacks in that show because they're trying to develop the character's backstory.
Mm-hmm.
So they do some flashbacks. If you're afraid of flashbacks, you can't develop characters.
Yeah.
You just can't.
You can't.
Because you have to you have to understand why they're on the bridge, why they're on Discovery, and without doing flashbacks and understanding, there's no good depth to that, right? Just by saying something.
I feel like the only good flashbacks we get are from Book.
You're right. Book is the only one that does
because
they did some Berman flashbacks, I think.
Yeah, they did because main character, but like other than that, there was Book who had flashbacks. But that was because his planet exploded.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the writing needs to improve, and I think I'm not a writer, but I think the writing. So I think the other problem with Discovery is that there's just way too much action.
Oh yeah, I think that there needs to be more moments of solitude.
Yeah, there's and we kind of discussed this a little bit in our first podcast.
Yeah.
But the action just needs to slow the heck down. It's like.
I think something that would really make this show better is if it was an episodic.
I think if it was episodic, I mean, Stranger Worlds kind of proves that out.
But I think Star Trek just kind of is meant to be an episodic, in my personal opinion.
I'm trying to think. So Discovery, I think, is the first non-episodic Star Trek, isn't it?
Yeah, because you have the first series, the original series.
Right.
Then you have Next Generation. That's episodic, but with a plot.
There's a plot. Yeah, there's a plot. There's plots woven in.
Yeah, and occasionally there's 2 episodes that are that's right after the next, but it's not next episode after next episode. That's just one continuous story.
Right.
There is a time, because it just gets really exhausting. There are times, there has to be times when it just ends. When a problem is resolved and then a new problem comes.
Yeah.
Just kind of like Next Generation. We have a problem. Maybe we'll go for 2 episodes or 3, but then it ends.
Right. They resolve it.
Yeah. And then, it keeps your interest going like, oh, well, what are they going to do next? Well, we've ended this problem. You watch the next episode, everything's be going fine until it doesn't.
But, I mean, even if you didn't do it episodic, okay, so let's take another show what's another show that's not episodic? Stranger Things, okay?
Yeah.
Not episodic, right?
No.
But
there are moments when they take a chill.
Well, they take it chill, but all the characters are developed.
That is true. All the characters that are shown are developed, other than like, in the newest series, like that one guy that was like
Pizza guy.
No, he was developed a little bit.
Oh.
It was like I don't know. It was the guy that was working with. Anyway, there are some characters in there that aren't developed. They're just complete side characters that you see for like 20 seconds.
Well, yeah, and you're not going to develop those.
You're not.
But,
I mean, like 20 seconds every now and then. But it's like, other than that, all the characters are developed. You have a full backstory. But I think even in like Stranger Things, even though it's not episodic, there are a lot of times where it feels like they've gotten a break, and then that break ends at that episode.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the next episode, you start with the occurring problem where it's like, whereas Discovery, it's like cliffhanger after cliffhanger, and I get that a cliffhanger is supposed to get you, but it can be a lot when it's all action and stuff.
My point was that is even that Stranger Things being non-episodic, everyone's developed. They could have done way more in Discovery to develop all the other characters that are on the bridge, right? And they could have done that. But the whole thing just, even like this last season, the whole thing seemed, even Stamets and the doctor took a back seat to the whole freaking problem, right?
Yeah.
And then, so then and even Saru kind of almost, it was really Book and Berman.
It really was. The only thing that Saru had was the Vulcan lady.
Right. So he's trying to, it was really just Book and Berman in that last season.
Yeah.
And then the Trill stuff that was going on as kind of a side story. Tilly was gone, and actually, I think Tilly actually.
I think Tilly being gone took away from the story a lot.
I do because I feel like Tilly provided that
happy feeling.
The happy feeling.
She was the happy part of it all.
Right, and that's the other thing about Discovery. It's so serious.
It is.
So serious.
Mhm. And then Tilly was kind of like that one quirky girl that was always happy all the time. People were like, "Why are you so happy?" And then she's just like, "Because no one's happy."
Yeah, she'd make jokes that were kind of out of place, and then it kind of took you. You're kind of like,
It made you laugh.
Yeah, but now everything is so serious. The burn. That's the. Okay, sorry, just totally got sidetracked. So when the whole thing in the 32nd century that no one can go into warp, it was called the burn.
Oh.
And
you're right.
That was because Saru's species, he had some sort of emotional. He was. I'm not going to go into it. The story's too big.
I think another part of it is that there's a lot of different side stories, and it kind of just can bubble all into one thing. Whereas opposed to like when you have episodic, it's focused on one time and it comes up every now and then, opposed to like having multiple side stories that are going at once. I actually have
sometimes when I'm watching Discovery, I actually have trouble following, and I follow things really well, but I sometimes have trouble following what happens, why is this happening, what happened before, how does this relate, and because I think they're just trying to mix too much in. Maybe it's really good story writing and I'm just not getting it. But I don't think so.
I think that there are parts that are good, but overall it is not a good Star Trek series opposed to a lot of what else we have seen from Star Trek, like Strange New Worlds, and opposed to like everyone else's opinions about Deep Space Nine and Enterprise. I think those are better than this. But
Deep Space Nine is one of the best written space shows out there.
It's amazing.
The dynamics of that show, and we'll have a whole episode on Deep Space Nine. But that is an
amazing show.
Amazing show. It's just
writing is impeccable.
Yeah, the writing on that show is just great. Sure, it had a few bad episodes. Every show does, but the overall story of that show was just amazing. I know some people don't like it because it's like it's not a spaceship, and that's why
space.
It's in space, but I mean that's why they got the Defiant.
Yeah.
But if you really look at the writing of that show, just the
is that show episodic?
So Deep Space Nine is kind of episodic.
Okay.
It always had the running theme of the Dominion War, the Cardassian War.
Oh yeah.
Right. It always had that running theme, but it was episodic yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was and then the whole Bajoran, temple thing and the the wormhole.
I think what forgot the name.
What?
I forgot the name of the show we're talking about.
Discovery?
Discovery, thank you.
Hi, welcome to the podcast. We're going to talk about Discovery.
Yeah, I think that Discovery, what it needs is just, I think it just needs better writers, in all honesty.
It needs focus. It needs to be focused on its... It needs
to be less political.
Oh my gosh. That is the other... Okay, so one last thing, because we do got to cut this short. Well, not short, it's long. But
there's so many...
There's so much... Look, I get...
There's so much real world political stuff in it that doesn't necessarily need to be in Star Trek.
So, two things. Star Trek has always been about sending a message, right?
Yes.
So the original series was sending the message of what humanity could be. What humanity could be when we did things right? When we got rid of greed, when we got rid of race, when we got rid of all these things, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great message, right? There was even in some of the shows, there was a political message in there, to some degree.
Yeah, there was, but they were usually based off of, political messages that have been mostly agreed on this is good, right? Basically, kind of in the way of that everyone could agree on, where it's like how to be kind or something like that. How to, what do you do when you find a race that, they have the whole system where you can't go on a planet that's not, you don't want to intoxicate the planet or...
Intoxicate the planet?
Well,
we're getting everybody drunk.
No. You don't want to give them technology before they can because you want them to develop. You don't want to
corrupt the planet.
Corrupt the planet.
Yeah,
thank
not
you.
Intoxicated. Some of the planets they were intoxicated on the planets, but anyway, with Enterprise, not so much Enterprise, but I think with the original series and Next Generation, Deep Space Nine for sure, and a little bit of Voyager. The messages were current, right? They were current, but they were things that, yes, like you said, they were not divisive. Yeah. Too much. There was a couple that were.
There was a couple, but it wasn't to the point where they're also trying to shove it in your face.
Right, and yes, you're right. They were not trying to shove it in your face.
They were kind of it was like each character kind of sent their own message. Right. They had their own opinions. And when it came to Star Trek, they would send a message, but it was faint.
Right.
It was like you knew that was the message, but they're not straight up saying, this is a message that we're sending.
Right.
It was shown.
Whereas with Discovery and a lot of other shows I watch these days, it almost feels like they're screaming the message at you. They're like, you will accept whatever it is we say. Now, I'm not trying to get political here or whatever, or in one side or the other, but Discovery just basically
blew it out of the
it's
water.
Almost like a hand comes out of the TV and slaps you in the face.
Just no.
And so that's sometimes it's just like you actually come away going, really?
Yeah.
I mean, really? Did you need to tell me that? Really?
And it's not even like they're showing you. They straight up just say,
yeah, right.
This is bad.
They're not. It's so yeah, because in Enterprise, I can remember a couple of episodes where the message was sewn into the story.
Yeah.
It was weaved in like a nice quilt, right?
Yeah.
You got it. You saw it. You understood it. You may not have agreed with it,
But you saw it.
You saw it, and the episode was still good.
You either agree or don't agree, and it's just one part of the story where it's like, okay, well, you can move on. But when it comes to Discovery, they shove it in your face.
Right. When it's Discovery is like being on a Nickelodeon show and the slime just falls on you.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. And okay, I'm covered in slime. Thanks very much. Mm-hmm. Right. So yeah, that's what.
And I think that's one thing that really kind of takes away from the shows because they're so focused on showing that message, they forget to focus on the actual story.
Yep. It is sometimes. Yeah, you're right about that. Okay. Well, I think again, we like Discovery for the most part. We watch it. We'll continue to watch it because it's Star Trek, because we love Star Trek.
We love Star Trek. There are some good parts. There are some Easter eggs. There are things that, if you want to know little things about Star Trek, watch Discovery.
There is some fan service in there as well, a little bit. Not as much as...
Like the whole thing with Spock. Everyone loves Spock.
Right. Not as much as Strange New Worlds, but, there's some fan service in there.
But overall, I think that it is one of the lesser good Star Treks out there.
I'm going to try to not correct your grammar there. Mm-hmm. Lesser good Star Treks.
It works. It works. It's fine.
Okay. So I think we're going to end there. Mm-hmm. So that's the end of our podcast. Thanks for listening. We do have our new podcast site up on anchor.fm. I will put the link in the show notes, and you can get this podcast on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. We're on Pocket Caster, and we do have an RSS feed, so you can just add it into your podcatcher and subscribe to our show. Thanks for listening, and we are going to sign out. I think next, we don't know what our next topic's going to be, but it'll probably be Stranger Things, I think, or what are you thinking?
Wednesday, maybe?
Oh, Wednesday, yeah.
Because we just both finished Wednesday, and it's fresh in our brains.
Yep,
so.
We'll probably do Wednesday, but maybe not on a Wednesday. We might do it on a Tuesday to really mess you up. So, anyway, thanks for listening, and we will see you later. Bye.
Bye.